Hi, I'm John Thorne from Thorny Motorsport, and yes, that title is right. I've driven over 500 different McLarens. In the last 7 years we've been servicing and tuning these cars. The actual number is over 2,000 cars. A lot of our customers come back year after year, so I can't count the same car twice. There's over 500 different McLarens of every model pretty much they've released. Now the plan of this video was to actually do a comparison about the new Artura and how it compared to the rest of the range. But the Artura being delayed, we thought we'd release a different video simply detailing and comparing each model one after the other. A lot of the emails and phone calls we get now are from people saying, what should I buy? Should I buy a 12C, a 570, a 720? And the reason why is that the prices are polarised down. So one amount of money could buy you more than one model. So it's actually quite a useful comparison, bearing in mind the cash that costs to buy these cars. So what we're going to do is we're going to detail each model one by one and compare them in terms of how they drive, in terms of power and in terms of handling. Now we're concentrating purely on road cars. We've driven all these cars on track as well. There's different metrics really for comparing in terms of road cars on track. This is purely on a road car. We're also comparing like for like. So the difference between a coupe and a Spider is pretty minimal across the McLaren range. So we're just making an assumption all in one. Personally, I prefer Spider cars because like the extra fun that a roof down gives you. But the cars, in terms of comparison, a Spider handles no differently to a coupe. The other advantage of this is what I do for a living. Now I drive these cars every day, and a lot of it depends on how we work as a business. Here, with my name across the door, we tend to work it so I test drive every single car that comes in for work. It's not consistent all the time, minor work maybe less so, but any car that kind of work comes in, I'm the last person to drive it. Really, I'm the measure that makes sure I'm happy the car goes back to the customer. That's why I drive so many. My record is actually 11 in one day. Back-to-back road testing different cars for customers. I think it was 5 12Cs, 3 650s and a few 570s all on the same day. So it does give me a fairly unique position to compare these cars and how they feel. So hopefully you'll like this video and you'll see how the items compare. Please at the end of it, we'll try and go through, it's quite a long video to go through each individual model, but if you like what you see, any comments you got, we'd love to hear from you. Alright, cheers. Now, I'm sat in an MP4 12C. Or 12Cs now call them. It makes sense to start our journey comparing these models in the first car McLaren made, which is this car. This is a 2011 plate coupe. Now we love these cars. These what started off from McLaren, and we owned one for 6 years. Great cars in every way. How we're going to do this video is we can compare them in terms of how they compare to each other in terms of handling and dynamics, and also in terms of quality in terms of their work. So like all things, a comparison is based on a measure. So we're going to give the 12C a measure of 100. Okay, so the 12C is a scoring points of 100 points, and then what we're going to do is rate the other cars relative to that. If you want to scroll through to, we'll put a little note down there somewhere explaining which model you want to look at. You're welcome to look at it, but the idea of comparing them is to see how they are. Now 12C is a great car, earliest car they've done. A couple of negative things about it that are worth mentioning, which does relate to their value. First of all, RS1. It's garbage, okay? It never really worked. Even RS2 is a bit bad, but RS1 really is useless. If all the things are negative of the car it is, it's this infotainment system. So get used to using your smartphone in the 12C. Other than that, really it's hard to find anything wrong with it. Brilliant car, very reliable. We've gone through various videos about gearboxes, engines, and various things. But as a starting point, the 12C of a measure of 100 is the ultimate in McLaren terms of models. So that's your starting point. So keep that in mind. 100 to 12C. We'll go through the next model and see how they compare. All right. Okay. Now I'm sat in a 650S. This is the one that superseded the 12C reasonably quickly, about 3 years after 12C came out. And if the 12C is 100, the score we give the 650 is 105. Now, don't take percentages, etc. These are numbers sort of made up in our minds trying to compare the vehicles. But in our view, the 650 is a little bit better than the 12C. Now, it's not a huge amount. In terms of actual levels, we know from the numbers that McLaren give us, there's slightly more torque, slightly more power, and a slightly faster gear change in the software. But in terms of the actual handling and process of the car, they are very, very, very similar. A lot of people couldn't tell the difference between driving a 12C and a 650 on the road especially. But that extra torque and that faster gear change is just enough to give it the edge over a 12C. Now, other obviously changes are visual. The front end is different and the rear end is different, and the few little side skirts, etc. that are slightly different. Now again, that's more personal choice. Personally, I prefer the front end look of the 12C. I prefer the rear look of 650. And there was a weird combination called a 625C, which had a bit of both when it came out for the Asian market. We've got one here, funny enough. But in reality, the comparison between 12C and 650 is a good one.
Okay, is it better built? Little bit. Does it have the same problems as 12C? Yes, it does. Are the problems worse than 12C? No, not really. Does it handle the same? Pretty much. Is it the same acceleration and power? Pretty much. The little differences that are there are noticeable, but not deal breakers in terms of comparing the cars. One difference is that the RS2 comes standard with the 650S. Now the RS2 is significantly better than the RS1 in that it's marginally less shit. Okay, they're both terrible, but RS2 is slightly less terrible than RS1. And also, most 650s come with carbon ceramic discs, which is a good and a positive, and also a negative. On track, they're not as good, don't last as long. On the road, they are better than steels, but it's a comparison there. Obviously, none of our comparison here is based on numbers. We're not looking at values and various things, because it depends where you are in the country and where in the world about what values you have. But it's a comparison. From a 12C to a 650, 650F is slightly better. Is it worth extra money? That depends on where you are. But given the choice, I'd probably still go for a 12C, simply because I love the front end of the things. But in terms of the cars, the 650 is ever so slightly better. Okay, what's next? What came after the 650? The 675 LT. Now, any McLaren enthusiast will know this car spectacularly well. It's arguably still one of the best cars they've made, if not the best car they've made. And certainly for cars on track, taking all the models into account, we will still pick a 675 LT as our track car. However, what's it like as a road car? Well, take our numbers. If a 12C is 100 and a 650 is 105, what do you think 675 is? 150. It is that big a difference between a 675 and a 650. Now, that is reflected in its cost, significantly more expensive, but it does actually make a big difference how the car is made. Now, the 675, it was MSO's first real production of a tailor-made car. There are so many differences between in terms of parts and how it's been built. It's a different car entirely in our view, let alone the visual impact you get from all the aerodynamics and various bits you've got. So in terms of a comparison, it really is that big a difference from a 650 to a 675. Certainly a huge difference compared to 12C 650, but 650 to 675 is possibly, or arguably, the largest jump you can have from model to model. However, it's not all good news. First of all, it's our view, generally speaking, the 675 is not the best road car McLaren make. It is too harsh on British roads. Now, it depends where you are in the country, but roads in the UK generally are crap, and any bumpy B road, you will struggle to keep all the power down this car on a bumpy road. Smooth A roads and track, perfect, wonderful car, enjoyable to drive, and bearable. But on a bumpy B road, yeah, it's a struggle. It really is. The second thing about it is its woeful turning circle. The QE2 can turn around quicker than this thing can. It's the only car we have to 50 pence piece into our garages here. Everything else we can get in. That's good because the steering feel is probably the best that McLaren's done because of less lock, but it means in terms of practical use, in terms of road, it's more of a pain in the arse. Everything else is exactly the same as 650. RS is the same, the infotainment is borderline crap. The build quality, generally speaking, is better. We've seen less issues with 675s, but they have the same issues they have as their model. Those are engines and gearboxes that we know, etc. But in terms of overall longevity and overall build quality, very good. Most of them seem to be held together pretty well. We have about 15 or 18 on our books at the moment. I've personally driven 11 675 LTs, and they're all remarkably similar in terms of consistency, which is normally a good sign of a car. So that's it. So 12C 100, 650 is 105, big jump to 150 for a 675. Now after 675 came out the Sport Series, the 540 and the 570. So let's see how they compare. So 675 to a Sport Series, good idea? Well, generally that's how it worked. After the 675 with the Super Series cars, there was a gap, and what McLaren filled it with the Sport Series cars. Now the Sport Series cars are analog. They have less in terms of technology, in terms of active aero and active suspension. So they're a different kettle of fish. They're also a lower price point. So by definition, they're a little bit slower, a little bit less powerful compared to Super Series cars. But in all intents and purposes on the road, very, very similar. So how does it compare? Taking a 570, which is the majority of cars that we see. There's a 540 as well, which is a slight homologation difference, which are very rare, but they're out there. And also the 570 GT, which is a slightly softer version, taking account of different bodywork and suspension. How does that compare to 12C, 650 and 675? Well, generally what we've given the Sport Series is 85. So 112C, 105 650, 150 675 and 85 for the Sport Series. Now that doesn't sound very much. The reason why is because they are slower. They're less power and less torque. However, their driving feel can be more interesting, more exciting. they have normal standard suspension, so they are more lively in the back end, and we often hear people say they find the Super Series cars are just too good in terms of handling, and they find the excitement of a Sports Series more interesting to drive. However, by definition, more exciting probably means less grip, because the Super Series cars do have better handling, and that's why they're down to 85. Bear in mind it's a Sports Series car, it's a cheaper car to produce anyway, and we think is a valid sort of comparison. Now, saying that, we own a 570 ourselves, so we love the cars, they're brilliant. In terms of design, they're looking more modern looking. The interior is nicer. I don't like the gap in the middle of the gap in between the passenger and the driver, but overall the build quality is there. In terms of the functionality of the gearbox, the engine's exactly the same. Do they have more or less problems? Pretty much the same, to be honest. There's no difference between the two of them. But as a comparison in terms of what the car can do and how it compares to 12C and 650, the Super Series cars still have the edge on the Sports Series cars, even though the Sports Series car is also a newer car. So a lot of people buy these things based on looks, which one is preferred look of, and obviously less mileage on the Sports Series cars. And the comparison of 540 and 570, very minimal. There's tiny amount of power differences. You'd be impressed to notice the difference, and in terms of trim differences, which simply come down to how the car looks. Worth a look in terms of process. Also the 570 GT, again, is it a softer version? It does have softer suspension, and the look is different with better aerodynamics. But overall it's still a 570 in terms of feel, so it gets the same score. So 100, 105, 150, 85 to here. The next jump after this one is the 600 LT. Let's see how the signal compares. Okay, 600 LT. Now those of you who are smart will realise I haven't actually moved. I'm in the same 570 I'm sat in before. I haven't got a 600 LT to film right now. It's a shame, one got picked up yesterday. But can't keep all these cars for customers, I want to get them done. How does a 600 LT compare to the 12C, 650 and the 570? And the answer is, it's about 100. So in other words, a 600 LT is pretty much on par with a 12C, which is impressive, taking into account the Sports Series, which 600 LT doesn't have active aero, doesn't have active suspension, whereas also 12C does. It's a newer car, it's held together pretty well, the same issues in terms of the rest of the cars have, but the infotainment system's better. This is based on what the same one shared with the 720, much better. It actually works. It's still not great, it's still, compared to a Tesla, for example, or the cars we have, they kill it. But that's McLaren's weakness, it appears to be, infotainment systems. But the 600 LT is a much sharper drive, okay? Arguably, again, is it a bit too stiff for the road? Possibly, as a road car, but it's not as stiff or as uncompromising as 675 can be. It's still technically a 570 with some toys put onto it. It drives very well on track, and it's probably one of the best of the bunch in terms of comparison, taking into account values and costs. Given the choice again, if I had my money, I would still pick a 12C over a 600 LT, purely because I like the technology. I want that active suspension, I want that active aero, which the 600 LT misses. But 600 LT, you can't deny, looks astounding, wonderful looking car, very modern looking, which is why it gets a value right up there with a Super Series car. It's impressive, but it's technically still a Sports Series. So, recap: 12C 100, 650 105, 675 LT 150, 570 85, 600 LT back to 100. See their comparisons working? So, one more model left to go, the 720. Where do you think it sits? Okay, I'm sat in our 720. We're coming to the end of the program. How does the 720 compare to the rest of the cars in the range? The answer is, we give it a score of 175. Yes, that's right, it's 75% better than a 12C. Now, that's not to say a 12C is a bad car, but the fact of life is, a 720, in taking account the entire McLaren range, is head and shoulders on top of everything else in terms of power, performance and handling as a road car. It really is that big a difference. It's quite astounding what McLaren have done with this particular model and how far they've gone with it. So, in terms of comparison, 675 LT, which one we get a lot, yes, if I wanted a track car, I would buy a 675 LT. But as a road car, the 720 kills it. Sorry, it really does. In terms of bumpy roads, smooth roads, a proper driving car that can do everything across the board, the 720 is the best car McLaren make, bar none. Pure track car, 675 LT has it beat. It really does. It's sharper, it's better in terms of handling, it's less on consumables compared to the car. But as a road car, especially if you live in where the roads are pretty crappy, the 720 runs away from 675 pretty quickly. Also, other aspects about the car which are better. The infotainment system and the system is better again. It's better than the 570. As are overall in the series, it's the best they do. It's still clunky compared to most modern cars, but it's the best thing it's got. Generally, the build quality is pretty good. Yes, there are issues in the launch edition cars, and they're niggles and do need to be sorted out by dealerships. But overall, after that, we've done very few engines on 720s, very few gearboxes on 720s, to be fair. So whatever they've done, they've got better. Now, a couple of things to consider about this, first of all, is that we haven't gone through any details about which is best or worst car in terms of reliability. And the fact is, there isn't one, okay? All the McLarens are all pretty similar in terms of reliability. Their main issue, and was two issues really, the main issue we have is that out of the factory they have niggles. And those are the ones that can be either very simple to fix or a ball ache to go through a process. So our general advice to people buying a McLaren is just buy one that's a year old. It's probably been through a dealership market a few times, the problem's been fixed. The second aspect that does affect McLarens is how they're looked after. Now we get, obviously as an independent, we tend to get the older cars rather than the brand new ones out of the factory. And they get into the hands of people who don't know what they're doing. We've seen cars which have literally been depreciated and wrecked in terms of value by 30, 40, 50,000 pounds by not running the proper servicing on the cars or doing a crappy job of it. So really it's down to condition, hence we advise an inspection before you buy a car. So, recount the side of it. 112C, 105 650, 150 675, 85 the Sports Series, and then 100 back to the 600 LT, and then 175 for the 720. It is that big a difference. Now, a couple more haven't covered. Obviously not covered the Senna, haven't covered the Speedtail, not sat in a Speedtail yet, so I can't make a comparison, and also 765 LT. Now I have driven a few of them, only a couple, and in all honesty, it's a 720 on steroids, I quite agree. Is it something I can consistently give an opinion about the amount of limit time I've driven? No, not yet. And I still argue the 720 would be a better road car, the 765 being stiffer, but I haven't driven enough to say that. Now remember, all these are my opinion, but they're based on me driving over 500 different cars in the last 7 years, and actually about 2,000 cars. I personally have road tested something like 60 720s, 18 to 20 675 in terms of different cars. So I've got a basis of comparison in terms of how the cars drive. Also for me personally, my job at Thorny Motorsport, other than simply making decisions, is to road test cars to make sure they're happy before they go back to the customer. And also I set up all of our customers' race cars. So my job is basically chassis engineering, making sure that car performs well, primarily on track but also on road. So I have a really good idea in terms of how to settle a car down, and obviously lots of miles, and gives me a good basis of comparison. I'm sure there'll be differences of opinions of this. We'd love to hear them, certainly from people who've driven or owned multiple McLarens as we have done. But I just want to put it out there to share people to see what they think. Now I'd love to do a comparison with the Artura when it comes out and see how it compares, how it fits in with our little scale we've got there. Eventually it will come out, eventually we'll get one, I'm sure. But until then, that's your scale to go for. A lot depends on the money you have. So always go from a basis of inspection, check the car you want to buy first, but that's a good comparison. And there is no such thing as a bad McLaren, just which one's slightly better than the other ones. Thanks for watching, hope it's been useful. Talk to you again soon. Cheers.